If you're like me, and you got no life and there's nowhere to go, then tune in to the Animation Truman Show. You'll be glad you did.
Good morning, friends. Well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the bold step of continuing on my little bitty Blender Odyssey. And interestingly enough, I've actually got Blender building on my laptop. Yeah, it looks like it's going to take actually about an hour and a half to compile. So that should be interesting to see if it builds successfully. Not really sure why. Because after all, if you're going to try to hack the code a bit, the whole compile link cycle where it takes an hour and a half just to see if the 3 lines of code you changed, didn't introduce new problems. It's pretty punitive from where I sit, so taking a drink of my tasty beverage. But, Blender's got a very long lineage of C code. When Tan originally wrote the program, he wrote it in C. And then when they sort of got a bunch of investors involved in the early 2000s and thought they were going to change the world with their game engine, they tried to basically rewrite the whole code base actually in C++, and as I recall, that kind of backfired a bit. And they wound up, it's a hybrid, I think. Don't quote me on that, but if I was a guy who was creating software anywhere remotely as complex as Blender, but let's just say 1/10 as complex as Blender, I'm pretty sure I'd probably be writing it in Python, and then anywhere I ran into performance issues, I'd be compiling to DLLs so that the Python can just call the C functions. If you think about it, I don't believe that the whole Blender 3D interface is essentially being managed by Python. I'm pretty sure that's not the case, but it certainly could, because all of the heavy lifting is actually being done by your GPU with the OpenGL subsystem, which of course is all highly optimized code. And so having interpreted code like Python just sort of telling all the worker bees what to do, but the actual work's being done by compiled code, that's a pretty good paradigm, and it lets you really speed up the development process. So anyway, fun stuff. Yeah, looks like nobody's here. Well, I don't blame you. Probably not too many people are interested in the odyssey of actually working through getting comfortable with the Blender Grease Pencil 2D workflow. It is fairly painful to watch. This is session number 4. Session number 1 was a little bumpy. Session number 2 was quite good. Session number 3 last night was, I would say, pretty rough because there were a lot of things I ran into that kind of threw me a little off kilter. But I'm staying the course, and I'll show you why. This morning what I did do, let me see here, if I jump in and out of, yeah, okay, so this is good. If I jump in and out of edit mode with the tab key, it remembers my selection. Okay, so let me just kind of show you what's happening here. I added the lattice on top of the whole grease pencil object, okay? And I created 2 deformations. One for when Mel is sort of leaning back like that, and then one for when we animate the head squash. Boing, 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 boing. Okay, so in the pencil test, of course, that was all done with just sculpting with the grease pencil, just flowing with it. And so now what we're trying to do is say, okay, can we kind of reduce the workload by doing things in the right order? And the first thing to do would be to do the ink and paint on the first drawing, because ultimately most of the animation in the whole shot is in fact one drawing that's just deformed, with the caveat that his head gets flipped. Okay, so I won't recap how you do that unless somebody posts in the chat and says, hey, how do you parent to a lattice? I don't get it. Because I've already covered it yesterday and the day before. Okay. But what we want to do now is, considering that the deformation, we're going to have Mel walking across the screen, but that can be done with the lattice. Okay, let me turn off automatic keyframing for a moment. I can show you that. So if I grab the lattice and move it around, because the grease pencil object is parented to the lattice, I can just animate the lattice. Here comes Mel. Do. And then go ahead and animate the shape keys. So what will happen in the animation is do. He'll come out to here. He'll kind of lean back like that as he's stopping. And then the animation of his eyes and mouth will all just be sort of pasted on after the fact. It'll be added later. In fact, with that in mind, let's go ahead and turn this shape key off. So the question, might be, why would you do this as opposed to, doing what you can do in Krita or Tahoma? And the reason is that if deformation of drawings is part of your normal way of working with animation, there really is nothing in Tahoma so the simple bending of his back you could do with the plastic tool in Tahoma. The squashing of the face, you could probably pull it off if you were pretty careful. Okay, but as a general rule, the deformation tools in Tahoma don't really compare at all to what you can do in Blender, at the cost of having to get it all set up. My contention at this moment is, once you get comfortable with the process of setting it up, it takes 1 minute. And indeed, having done it a few times the last couple of days, hey, good morning, Maria. Having done it the last couple of days a few times, I'm finding that's absolutely the case. Is that this morning, parenting the grease pencil object to the lattice and actually creating these shape keys so I could do the squash and stretch took no time at all. So it's just going through the pain of finding your way around and running into the occasional gotchas. Okay, so one of the gotchas is going to be that his head flips. You could do this all with deformation if it wasn't for the fact that his head changes position. Well, I got a fix for that. So what I'm going to do is grab the grease pencil object and just go into edit mode. I've already selected his head. So what I'm going to do is hit the M key, and I'm going to move the head into a new layer. And I'm going to give the head its own layer all by itself. Okay? Then I'm going to take one extra step, which is I'm going to actually put, let me see here. Let me think about this for half a second. Yes. Okay, this will be interesting too. Let's jump into object mode, and then right at the base of his neck, I'm going to add an empty. Okay? Plane axis empty. Okay, so there's the empty, and I'm going to scale it down so it's not very big. And then, this is really kind of interesting because you've got different sort of levels of parenting. The grease pencil object obviously is parented to the lattice, so the lattice can both move it around and deform it. So that's useful. But you also have the ability to parent individual layers to, well, in this case, like an empty. And you do that in the grease pencil properties, specifically the object data properties. With the relations tab, you open that up and you say, oh, and this would probably be empty 001, I assume, because this empty down here, let me just see if that's active. That is not active. So what I'm going to do, this is a holdover from yesterday. What I'm going to do actually is I'm going to parent the lattice to this empty as well. Okay, all that does is give you a little bit more control, because now you could limit, you could just relegate the lattice to just the deformations, and separately you could control his movement around the screen with the empty. And it usually turns out that is a wise way to handle animation, is kind of breaking things up into pieces. Anyway, if I grab the grease pencil object, it is parented to the head. Now what's interesting, or I should say the head layer is parented to the empty. So now as you can see, okay, that's what I wondered. Okay, so this is what I just learned. Unfortunately, is it looks like we have to make a choice. Okay, because the parenting of the entire grease pencil object to the lattice appears to be excluding the possibility of parenting a single part of the grease pencil object to an empty. Not sure why that would be, actually. So the first thing I want to find out now is, what if I turn the lattice off, okay, in the view so that it isn't active anymore? Okay, well, does it become inactive or does it just become invisible? I suspect it just becomes invisible. Use during render. Display it in edit mode. Probably we want to go to the outliner. Hello, why are we not in the outliner? Oh, I guess I hit F10. Okay, so the empty is the parent. This is the first empty, the main one. And then this one is parented to the head. And we can see that it shows it's constrained to the empty. But I don't think this is going to work quite the way we would hope. If we turn the lattice... Okay, now that's interesting. Why did the lattice just switch to its deformed shape? What the heck did I click? Oh, that's interesting. So if you turn the lattice off in the viewport, it must be that was the state I left it in when I was editing the shape keys. So, well, what's the point here? The point is, we want to be careful, because what I want to do is, I actually don't want to delete the lattice or anything like that. What I want to do is disconnect the lattice from the grease pencil object. So we're learning as we go here, folks. If we delete the grease pencil modifier, will that delete the lattice? I suspect not, but let's save our work. Okay, so by removing the modifier, all we're doing is breaking the link between the grease pencil object and the lattice. Okay, so now if we go back to our outliner, we can see that the lattice is in fact still here, and so we still can see that it's going to have its shape keys. Everything about the lattice is still in place. It's just not doing anything to the grease pencil object. So that's useful at this point. So we'll just put that back to 0. And now what I'm curious about is, does this work? Okay, and it doesn't seem to. Excuse me, why I'm so sneezy today, I have no idea. Hey, Golden Slime. Why don't you download the newest version of Blender? This is 2.81 and 3. Basically, I don't use 3 yet. It's got some things about it that are a little different and fiddly, and it's got some things that are amazing too. But I have no problem with Blender 3. But for grease pencil animation, and for a host of reasons I won't get into right now, my preferred version is 2.81a. I also have 2.93 long-term support on my machine, but my basic go-to version is 2.81a. So, alright, if you don't like that, you'll just have to get over it. Okay. So we're kind of working with this. I'm feeling like something actually doesn't seem quite right to me. If I put the empty here, and we go to our grease pencil object, we can see that the head is connected to empty 001. I wonder if I got my empty names wrong. Well, one way to find out, jump back to the outliner. Yeah, that's empty 001. So let's call this EMPHEAD, emp head. All right. So what we're trying to figure out now is why the relations between the head layer and the empty don't seem to be working yet. Okay, that might be a clue right there. That might be a clue. When I turn the head off, we still see the head. That tells me that probably something went haywire when I move the when I moved the lines into what I thought was going to be the head layer. Okay, so let's just try it again. Let's kill this layer entirely and try it again. So if we take the grease pencil object, you can see that the head is selected, right? Okay, now the rest of the body's getting dragged around because of the proportional editing tool. If I hit the O key, that takes care of that. Now what I said I wanted to do was I wanted to oh, I know what I did. Wait, I think I know what I did. Move. Yes. We're going to move these strokes into a new layer. There's the new layer. And when I turn the layer off, I still see it. So that's a little weird. That's a little weird. That is not operating the way it's supposed to. Okay, so I would call that a bug in Blender 2.81a. Because when you grab a bunch of strokes and move them to a new layer, they're supposed to actually get moved. What it did was it created the new layer, but it didn't actually move it. So now we need to find out, change the name of that to head. Let's just see if things work now the way we expected. So let's grab empty head. And now I'll bet you, if we jump into object mode, now the head will get moved around. Okay, so that's good news. The question now becomes, if we parent the entire grease pencil object to the lattice with the modifier, do we lose the link between the head and the empty? If we don't, then we've got the ability to animate this guy exactly the way we want to. So let's add a modifier, which is going to be a lattice. And the lattice is going to be object is going to be, okay, so another apparent bug here. This is really, quote-unquote, bugging me. The lattice object to deform with, I should get a drop-down that shows this lattice. It's kind of stupid, but failed to set. Okay, so now that's weird. Okay. So we're going to keep trying to fiddle with it. All right. So now what I'm going to do actually is the reverse of what I just did. I'm going to grab the grease pencil object and then grab the lattice and hit Control P, and we're going to do this the manual way. Lattice deform. Okay. And now let's see what happens. Okay, that is working. So that's very, very good. The question is the parenting with the empty going to quit working? Okay. If this works the way I expect, then you'll be kind of impressed with what's about to happen. What I'm going to do is grab the empty. Yes, look, it works. So now if I move his head away, look at this. And then we go back here, look what happens. This is very good news. Guys, this is exactly the way I hoped it was going to work. So I'm going to hit undo a couple times. Get back to where I was. So what this means is that we can do the shape keys on his body and his head, and then at the appropriate time, we can use the empty to go ahead and flip his head over. Cool, huh? It's all there. Okay, so now, question becomes, yeah, and what you want to do, you know, again, we're back to thinking about workflow here. What you want to do is not, don't get too eager to see things move. And by the way, look at this. Okay, so now this is one of those structural things you want to think about. If I go back to the beginning here, you can see that if we grab this empty, you can see that it's ready to do its job. But when we move this overall controller around, look what happens to that empty. Absolutely nothing. So what we want to do is, let's move this to here. Again, let's get everything back to where it's supposed to be. So that's basically our starting point. And why did it jump back? That tells me there is an animation key on this empty that I didn't want to have be there. Okay? So what I was trying to say a little bit ago is don't get too eager to see things move, because you will paint yourself into a corner And this is basically the essence of the whole exercise in Blender, is figuring out how we can do the right things in the right order so that we don't create problems for ourselves later. Now, think about this one. I'm going to take this empty right here, and I'm going to hit Shift and click this empty, and I'm going to make this the parent. Okay? Why did I do that? Well, now, if I move the whole thing around, okay, well, forgive me, I guess I introduced a problem. Okay, I see what's happening. Okay, well, that's kind of a loop dependency that I didn't take into account. Makes sense, though. Okay, so you see what's happening. When this empty moves, because it's moving this empty, it's causing the head to respond. Now, if we move this independently, you can see it still controls the head just fine. So I'm going to hit Alt-P and remove that parenting relationship. And this is one of those tricky ones. At least as far as I can tell, what we're going to have to do is animate him over to this point. And we're going to kind of decide in advance that this is where he's going to be done moving, such that when he gets to where he's going to get to, the empty's where it's supposed to be. And that just allows us very easily to potentially rotate his head. And of course, if we hit scale on the X -1, that allows us to flip his head. Okay? So same thing. It's S for scale on the X-axis, -1. SX -1 is how you flip anything. Okay? So no big deal. I will say, though, when we get to this part of the animation, we're going to want to, we'll just erase his mouth. So I think when we do the initial ink and paint, we'll go ahead and leave his mouth in there. No big thing. And another thing that we want to consider now, since we're trying to do the right things in the right order, is that it wouldn't be a bad idea to turn to, let's do the paint on his head, and then once his head is colored in, not the eyes and the mouth, but just the head, the headband, and the hair, so that it's opaque. Then we'll turn it off, get the rest of the body painted, because we're going to want to close these shapes right here so that they will fill, and then the head, of course, will appear over top of them, right? Making sense? So let's go into draw mode. We're on frame 1, and we need to go ahead and get some basic painting done. So let's take the skin material, and what I do want to also do, I think, is let's shut off the sketch layer so that it's not causing problems for the fill tool. Okay. So, quick and dirty fill operation. First I'm going to hit Control and just close this leak. That should, okay, that did not fill. And by the way, why the heck is this defaulting to 40 pixels? You schiller thing. Okay, stop everything. Stop. Another example of what I'm talking about. You'll run into this in any program you use. But see what I did? I was filling in the wrong layer. I need to be in this layer. My apologies, friends. Okay, and of course the thickness that I changed got changed back. I need to change that in my default settings. I do not want a thickness default on the fill tool, whoops, of 40 freaking pixels. Okay, now this is probably going to leak, and it did. Okay, so there I'm going to go Control, just close that. Now we've got the head taken care of. I do think I'm going to go ahead and just, let's get rid of the, let's go to the lines layer. Let's just get rid of the mouth for now. Okay, and just so you guys know, this is an ongoing process of making mistakes and then figuring out what I did wrong. What I just did was I grabbed my draw tool and I hit Control so I could erase, and nothing's erasing. I know I'm in the correct layer, the skin color is not in isolation mode, meaning lock unselected. That is not the case. Okay, now, wow, what did we just see? Yeah, bugs and more bugs. I guess I inadvertently removed the unused slots, maybe. Okay, so what I'm trying to figure out now is, why doesn't my eraser work? Kind of weird. If I go into edit mode, I try to select the mouth and I can't select anything. I know that's part of the head. Go here, select the head. Okay, that's what I was doing wrong. I had the body selected, and there we go. So this is what you're going to do. Don't kid yourself. This is exactly what you're going to do. You're going to make mistake after mistake, and after a while, you're going to quit making them. Right? You're just going to start to remember what you were supposed to do or intended to do. Cool beans. We're still in the head, so we can select the skin. Okay. I made another mistake. Okay. Here's the mistake. The mistake is that generally everything in my paint process is in separate layers. Okay. My layers are named on the basis of their function for me as an animator, not their function in terms of what they represent in my scene. Okay, with the exception of the head. Get it? So the head is a head. Everything else is not named like body or hand or anything like that. It's named based on its animation function. So what's the mistake that I have right now? The mistake I made was I went into the fill layer and filled in the color, but those fills for the color cannot be in the fill layer. They need to be in the head layer, so that when I animate it, everything about the head can move together as a single self-contained unit. Okay? What do? Well, let's go into the fills layer. There's two ways we could do it. We can go ahead and just erase what's in the fills layer, which is probably the best approach since there isn't much there. The other approach you could take, just be aware, is you could go into your palette and you could say lock unselected, and then that would give you the ability to select all, but it would only select the current color that's selected, which of course is the skin. And for what it's worth, to speak a little bit to Golden Slime's question, as I'm working through this, I gotta say, I am finding more and more bugs. Definitely in Blender 2.81 that I haven't bumped into before. Why, when I isolated the skin, did the icon turn white? That's not happening with any other material. That's just a little bit weird. It's not white down here, so I'm definitely seeing some things like that. Now it turned back when I did unlock all. So who knows? Is it a bug or is it a feature? Okay, so the obvious question is, how do you want to handle your fill operations when you've got one little piece of your character that you want to have? I know what the colors need to be. They're not going to change. There's no reason I can't keep this as a self-contained unit. Okay? Well, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to go into the head layer, and we're simply going to click this little icon here that says draw strokes on back, and that way I can do my fill operations, and they will be behind the lines. Before I do that, though, there is one little caveat, and that is I'm seeing quite a stupid-looking distortion here. To be safe, again, because I'm getting back on the path here with Blender, I am definitely, I'm kind of running through molasses a little bit for sure. Moving slow, in other words. But what I'm looking at here is that I want to go into edit mode and stop everything. Okay? Once again, what's going on? Why am I seeing two sets of ink lines? Is proportional editing turned on? No. I don't think I'm seeing onion skins. Oh, I know what I'm seeing. Okay, that's interesting. I think what I'm seeing right now is the fact that this empty that's controlling his head is slightly offset. And that's interesting to note as well. Okay, so in other words, I'm noticing that we've got this shape here that's not filled around his jowls, I guess you'd say. I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and move that up a little bit. The drawing looks fine that way, so that gives me a little better clarity on what I'm trying to do. So you say, what are you trying to do, Dave? Well, what I'm trying to do is go ahead and isolate the head so that I can paint it. So let's go into draw mode. Okay, things are looking pretty normal. And so what I'm going to do is grab the fill tool. I'm grabbing the skin color, and then I'm going to hit control so I can actually close this gap and stop everything. I just made another mistake. The mistake is I should have first clicked that so that I'm drawing the strokes on the back. And now we got that filled. We've got that filled, and we've got that filled. Okay, now we can procedurally fix this color so that this is basically Mel's hair color. Excuse me, forgive my sniffles, friends. Okay, I really don't want that to be so saturated. The skin, I mean, the skin color is probably okay. That's pretty much normal. I mean, I'll probably pull up a reference image later. But, okay, so now we've got his head colored. Again, I can't emphasize enough that what has taken half an hour to do, once you're comfortable, I mean, this would take, everything I've done since I started would probably take you like 1 minute. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but it wouldn't take half an hour, that's for sure. Okay, so what are we going to do here? At some point, we're going to have to get the bowls in there, and this really kind of speaks to one of the reasons why I'm using Blender, is that we've got a wonderfully procedural workflow, okay, where we can leave some things unfinished and come back to them later, and it is not going to be a problem to just update things. So what I'm going to do here is just clean this up a little bit. Oops, there's your mistake. Yet another mistake. Boom. Got to have your ink if you're going to draw ink. You can't draw ink if you don't select your ink. Stupid. You stupid fool. All right. As I guess probably Gilbert Godfrey would say. Okay, so now we actually offset his head, and we can confirm that indeed everything is still operating as advertised. I can see one thing right now that I want to fix. Again, thank you, procedural workflow. If I hit the tab key to jump in and out of edit mode, you can see this little issue right here. So I'm going to say we want to be in tweak mode probably. Tweak lets you just click on a point. Okay, stop. Another mistake with Blender. Blender, this is a good thing. Blender remembers the last selection. There's a catch to that, which is when you go into edit mode and you're zoomed in like this, and you don't notice that there's these vertices up here that are selected. You get in the habit of every single time you go into edit mode, the first thing you do is hit Alt-A, unless of course you wanted to remember the previous selection. So, with Blender 2.8, we do still select with the right mouse button. Okay, and then just toggle in and out of edit mode. And I can see, just making sure that these edits look smooth. That makes a nice transition. I would say I'm not totally thrilled with this. And see, isn't that cool? We can change the deformation kind of fix it up over time, and all of our changes just propagate through just like you would hope or expect they would. So there you go. All right, so we got that dialed in. Now all we got to do is, and so I suppose my point with all that is that later on we're going to have to put in the animated pile of bowls that he's carrying. Right. Well, we can always add his hand in later. Nothing we're going to do to create this whole animated sequence will be affected by updating the drawing later. So, good stuff. Let's grab the grease pencil object, and let's go into draw mode. And we want to, probably for filling operations, we're probably going to want to turn the head off so it's not creating a distraction. And now we can go ahead and do our fill operations. So, what are our colors? It looks like we need another color. So what you do is in the palette, you hit the plus symbol, and you say, well, I'm going to use the green color, but now these two slots are both pointing to the same color. So then you have to hit this little duplicate button so it creates a new material. Mel, and by the way, that's what made last night's session a little bit clunky, was that we were bumping into the way that Blender treats an object and the data block that the object is pointing to or referring to. In Blender, those are two different things, and it can get you in trouble if you're not careful. We do not need a stroke on this color, and I'm going to say we want this to be a little bit lighter than the headband. So, fill tool, clickety click. Okay, that worked out pretty easily. And as I recall, aren't his armbands the same color? Let me look at my other shots here, friends, and make sure I'm not talking trash. Actually not really. Actually this should be more like this color, and this color definitely should be a little bit darker. A little bit bolder on the darkness. Okay, so now we can color in his skin. Boom, 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 and we're basically done with color work on Mel. Okay? Which means we can get into animation now, believe it or not. So everything about that process, remember, we're going to put the eyes and the eyes and the mouth in later, and we'll use this as a guide. Okay? So, let's back up here just a little bit. And again, take half a second and really think about what we're doing so we do the right things in the right order. Frankly, friends, I am inclined to now go ahead and put the pencil test on a completely separate grease pencil object, just so that it can serve as a guide. And as you can see, and it's not going to be, well, I guess we don't need to, come to think of it, because we're going to have to animate him into the scene anyway. So when he gets to here, what makes it a little difficult is if we use the lattice to deform him and move him and bend him back the way he is there. The problem is that with the sketch being in the same grease pencil object, it's going to get bent too. So he's basically bending twice, right? So for that reason, I'm inclined to say, let's isolate the sketch layer. Let's go into edit mode. Let's hit the A key to select all, and let's hit P. And we're gonna separate the active layer. Boom. Okay? That's what we did last night, but it was a little bit on the clunky side. So now we have Mel. We have the copy, which is going to really be the pencil test. And I stopped talking because I'm noticing that we still have this head object here that is, it's a holdover from last night. I'm pretty sure that's not even Yeah, in this, what I'm thinking about here is, it would be nice if there was a quick way to just isolate. Let me turn all these layers off. Let me turn everything off. And as you can see, there's our sketch, and now whoops. Okay, there's the animation from last night. If we turn the pencil test off, this appears here. It does. So this is a bit of a clunker. But again, it's basically the same type of thing I was running into yesterday, where there is no way around this. I wish Goswami was here watching this, because he needs to understand, as does everyone, that there is no way around what I am experiencing. You will never master your tools. You'll never get good at anything unless you go through this process. You're just running into one little weird thing after another that doesn't behave quite the way you expected, not quite sure what's going on. Well, to which I say, get over it. That's what I have to tell myself. Get over it. Okay, so I'm going to take the whole Mel grease pencil object and turn it off, so I don't even see it. Okay, now we've got the pencil test, but what we will notice is that if we deform the lattice, I'll bet you his body is still going to deform. Sorry, that's not what I meant to do. I clicked the wrong thing. Yet another mistake. Okay, as you can see, it's still deforming. We do not want it to deform. Well, why is that? Well, that's because this grease pencil object is in fact still parented to the lattice, and we need it to not be. So, Alt-P, clear the parent, and keep the transformation, actually, because if I don't do that, I suspect when I clear the parent, it's going to jump to another location. Well, let's find out. Yeah, a little bit, but I mean, that's okay. I'm going to hit undo and do it again. Clear parent and keep transformation means that it's cleared its parenting relationship, but it's going to stay put. It's going to stay where it was. So now what we have is we have the entire pencil test animation, and it will not be affected by the lattice. That means we can animate our ink and paint. And okay, strike that. We're almost there, friends. We're almost there. Same thing here. Alt-P. I'm going to hit undo because I'm curious about something here. Actually, this, let's bend this way back and then clear the parenting. I want to see what happens. Alt-P. If we clear the parent and keep the transformation, does the deformation remain? It does. Holy cow, I did not expect that. I did not expect that. So what we want to do is turn any deformations off. Otherwise, we're going to be, well, of course, the other thing we could do is just clear the parent. So let's actually test that again, because we've got to learn this stuff and make sure things are going to behave the way we think. So now if we bend it and then clear the parent, without keeping the transformation, it should snap back to its original shape. And it didn't. So that is definitely wacky. Definitely wacky. So let's just keep going one step at a time. Alt-P. Let's clear its parent. And now let's go back to the outliner and see what's going on here. You've got an empty parented to a lattice parented to Mel. Mel 001 and the head are both not parented to the lattice, as you can see. Now I'm looking for bugs. If I go to the grease pencil modifiers, there's what's got me a little weirded out. what I'm seeing is, okay, this is just a Blender thing here. So what we're seeing here, I'm pretty sure, is that this grease pencil object, not this one, but this one, you can decouple it in the outliner. I think this is a good thing. It's a little, you better darn well make sure that things are connected up the way you expect, though. You got a grease pencil object here. Okay, what did I just do? Darn it. I accidentally clicked something, and there's so many capabilities in Blender that if you just accidentally, your finger wiggles a little bit, and oh, I clicked the mouse. Oh, something just happened. Holy criminy. Okay. Stay calm. Okay, do you guys see what's going on here? We've disconnected the parenting relationship between this grease pencil object and the lattice. So this is just grease pencil strokes that were sculpted. That's why he's moving around. Yet, even though I cleared its parent, which it doesn't have one, and that is showing correctly here, because the lattice does not have these two grease pencil objects as children. Just Mel is the child. Yet, if you look at the grease pencil modifiers, the lattice still appears to be able to be mapped to deform the grease pencil object, even though it's not in a parent-child relationship anymore. I didn't really know that was going to happen. Is it happening the way it appears to be? I don't know. Let's hit Shift F9, or I'm sorry, let's hit Shift F7, select the lattice, and do a deformation and find out. If this deforms, yeah, that is exactly not what we wanted. So, lesson learned. Once you connect up a grease pencil object to a lattice, you better delete the modifiers. Now, the other thing I'm seeing that's a bit strange, well, I was seeing this yesterday too, is why I was seeing the head when the head was cut away is a little strange, but only because this is the same thing we saw last night, is there is no keyframe, okay? So there's no keyframe on frame 1. So you would think it would actually be blank, right? So as near as I can discern it, if there's a keyframe here at the front, it's kind of the same way Krita, well, actually, I guess Tahoma doesn't behave this way, but whatever's the first frame downstream, we're seeing at the beginning, unless we explicitly insert a blank frame. Make sense? Hope so. Okay. Well, I wonder if Blender's done building. And they said, probably not. Judging from the looks of it, it's going to take about an hour and a half to build. So, and of course, that would be Blender 3 that's getting built on the laptop. Okay, guys, so now what we have to do is, once again, because we're just going to go around the block over and over and over and just find out if things behave the way we expect. And now, finally, things are behaving the way we expect. We have successfully decoupled the pencil test from the ink and paint. Again, if you were kind of used to the tools and you kind of were used to doing the right things in the right order, and you were kind of used to doing things like hitting Alt-A when you go into edit mode, everything I've done so far today in 49 minutes, I venture to say pretty confidently would take you about 12 minutes. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but it certainly wouldn't take you almost an hour. But you know what? I'm determined to get through that learning curve. There's my ink and paint. So now what's going to happen is, in my drawing, Mel bends back like this. So now it's not going to be exact, but it's going to be close. What we're going to do is we're going to just do our lattice animation. Okay? So now, if we look at the, if you look at the positioning of it, the question becomes, are they lined up nicely here? And it looks to me like they're not. Okay? So I'm actually going to take I want to kind of get started on the right foot. So I'm going to grab this empty. I've got two choices. I can either move the pencil test or I can move the ink and paint. It actually would probably make more sense to move the pencil test up a little bit. So I'm going to hit the G key and then I'm going to hit shift so I can just kind of dial it in. And really probably about there is where I want to be. Okay, so let's go back to our, well actually let's go back to our lattice. Okay, step 1, lattice, bend. I hit the I key over this keyframe, boom, so that's animated now. It's got an animation keyframe in it. We really don't want this to be on grease pencil, we want it to be on dope sheet so we can see what we're doing. Alright, now he's going to bend back, and as you can see, we've just uncovered a little bit of a flaw in that shape key. Okay? Well, what can we do about that? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and put the lattice in edit mode. Hit Alt A, as I said before. And we don't want to be in tweak mode. Let's do select lasso. And we want to make sure proportional editing is on. That's the O key. And now here's what we're going to do. We're going to go G key and then shift. Okay, we want to really open up that influence. So I'm gonna scroll my mouse wheel and we're going to pound that down to where it wants to be. Boom. Okay, so as you can see, we have the ability to procedurally update or change or fix or tweak these shape keys. We're also going to be able later to add his arm in here because as you can see his arm's missing. Doesn't matter. We can add that later and everything will update just as you would maybe hope. Okay, so now I'm going to put an animation key in right here by mousing over the controller and clicking I to insert a shape key. Okay? Now what we're going to see is these are going to move at a little different pace. Right? So now what we're going to do is take this key here and we're going to duplicate it there. And now they move together nicely. Okay, so now what we're not going to do is we're not going to worry about animating him walking into the scene until, that'll be the last thing we do, right? That's going to be, he's going to, the first half second he's going to go like this, basically. So there's no reason to worry about doing that now. Okay? Now just so you don't think I'm lying to you about the fix-ups, let's go into the lines layer, I should say. Grab our charcoal ink and by gum, fix this. We want to be in draw mode. And I think for my sanity, I'm going to erase his head so I can really see where I'm drawing here. Oh, that's pretty much it. I'll worry about the hands later. But one thing that would be nice would be, it would be kind of pretty brilliant, frankly, for Blender to manage this. But it would be nice if we had a little more control over what layers are being soloed or hidden at different times. But that, again, that's a very programmatically be a really challenging thing to design in a way that everyone would be happy with. So all I did was just turn the layer off. Okay, so now on the skin, I want to be in the fills layer. And frankly, this drawing is so simple that there really is no reason it was that important for me to keep the fills and the lines in the separate layers. But at the same time, we're going to have the shadows on a separate layer no matter what, or we can't mask them. So we might as well, just kind of get over it and Okay, so now we have an interesting challenge. In that, having hidden that layer, I don't have a ready way to grab the sketch grease pencil object and make it visible again. So basically I need to hit Shift F9 and do it. No, not the camera, silly. I have to grab it here. See, this is what I showed you guys last night. It really makes sense to just have two of these freaking things open, man. So you've always got access to your outliner, and at the same time you've got you know, access to your palette and all the rest. So this is something I noticed last night too. Definitely, what do you call this except a bug? Well, I guess it makes sense, come to think of it, in kind of a weird way, in that this is the pencil test and there is nothing else in it. So it appears that what Blender did was clean out all the materials that aren't actually used in this object. So I kind of see the point, but now we'll just turn the sketch layer back on. Okay. Now, speaking of which, if we go ahead and grab, unfortunately we have to extend this back out so we can grab a hold of Mel. Right there. And let me see something. If I grab this GP object. Okay, so notice, if you want to see, this is something that could easily confuse someone. If you want to see the layers for the a certain grease pencil object, and there's more than one in your scene, it doesn't do you any good to grab the object in the outliner. Which is a little strange because, as you can see, the dope sheet updates, but this doesn't. If you select the grease pencil data block, then it updates. So there you go. Kind of a lot to remember here, friends. Kind of a lot to remember. Absolutely. Lots to remember. Okay, there's the... Okay, so the lattice needs to not be in edit mode anymore. And it appears to me like right there, you can see we've got the animation of Mel's head. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. We are already on the lattice. So what we're going to do is go to here, right there, and we're going to take the head squash, hit the I key, and put in a keyframe. And then there's the squash, so let's go ahead and squash it. Obviously, as you can see, it's not exactly the same. That's pretty close. Okay, and then it expands bigger. And then, presumably, will land in its initial place. And so now, when we animate this, cool beans. So, and one could argue that that squash is a little bit slow. Sorry about that. So let's grab just that key and move it forward one frame. I like that better. Okay. Now what we're going to do, watch this. This is going to be kind of fun. Okay, so right here, I'm going to click the empty, and I'm going to insert a location, rotation, and scale keyframe. Here, I'm going to rotate it, and unfortunately, because of the positioning of everything, let me think about this. Is it possible? There really is not an edit mode for empties. It'd be nice if you could move the empties. this probably doesn't make any sense to you guys, but move the empty's location without while leaving its center of influence where it is. Actually, I want to do the opposite. I would want to move the center of influence, but not necessarily change the location. Anyway, what am I trying to say? Well, what I'm trying to say is this isn't lined up anymore, so we've got to kludge it. We've got to do a little bit of a kludge. Boom. We're going to insert the same kind of keyframe. There it is. Boom. Okay, so now we've got a squash, and we can do that. Let's do scale on the Z. That doesn't work. We can't scale on, let me think about this. We can't scale on the Z because the rotation is not normalized, and so we're probably, the only way we could make that work, we need to do it with the lattice. That's what I'm missing here. So let's grab the lattice. Sorry about that. Okay, so what we're going to do is right here for the head squash. Why is that not at 0? One, stretch, and then here, okay, another, one, stretch. Oh, okay, so this is normal. I apparently never put this other key in here, so Shift D, let's duplicate that key. Okay, and then right here, that's on 25. Let's duplicate that there. And then the question is this gonna work? And the answer is, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Insert a key. I would say 1.2. I'm sorry, it would be a negative number. Hello? Yeah, that's probably not a great idea. Let's just put this back to 0. Insert I key. Okay, and then here we're going to grab the empty. This might be where it all falls apart. If it was going to all fall apart, it would probably be here. Okay, so now I'm going to get carpal tunnel syndrome because I am fighting with the interface right now. I'm like clicking things and nothing's happening, so it's a little distracting. And I think the reason is because one of the things in Blender 2.8 Plus is that what used to work a certain way for 20 years doesn't work the same way anymore. That's basically the gist of it. So I have to hit Shift space bar so that I can switch from the cursor mode to the selection mode. And there I finally was able to select it. Okay, so now what we have to do is go scale on the X, -1, and rotate it. And again, because the centering of it is wrong, and we're kind of in one of those quintessential positions where the only way you could fix it is go back a zillion steps. It turns out it's probably just as well just do it this way. Now what we're going to get here going on is probably going to look pretty strange. Yeah. Right? And that's because of the rotation. Probably hard to see, but right? It's kind of a kind of an age-old problem that you have with trying to manage 3D rotations in 2D. So what we actually would have to do here is a little tricky. Actually, this could be gotten rid of. Okay. And then the thing is, we have to duplicate this key so that we can then massage it. So I would say little rotation, little movement. Okay. So here, let's lock this go to here. Okay. We still have the empty selected, so we pop this up here, insert really just location and rotation. Frankly, we really don't need to deal with scaling there. Rotate. So yeah, this is definitely kludgy because of the it's not centered right, but hardly the end of the world. Okay, and then right here we've got to get the body back to where it's supposed to be. So this is going to turn out to have been a mistake. I'll show you. I actually just made a huge mistake, and again, this totally comes down to doing the right things in the right order. At least I'm pretty sure I made a mistake. What's the mistake? Well, the mistake is when I get his body back up to where it's supposed to be here, all the animation I just did with the empty is now wrong. So, oh well. Well, friends. Okay, and this, probably the hardest thing, I would say, this is true with all animation software, but probably the hardest thing in Blender is the type of thing we're seeing now. Where what you're doing is you're going, what is it that I animate? You know, what's the parameter that has now an interpolated keyframe? You can see it's interpolating all the way from here to here. There's no way in the world this would ever be what you would want, right? But yet there it is. And I'm looking at the data, and this is where your eyes start to get bloodshot, and you got to go buy blue filter glasses because your eyes are just destroyed trying to just staring at the screen, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Okay, well it's pretty vexing. I animated the movement back all the way to here, and now I'm looking at all of this. I'm on the dope sheet. This is the lattice. And we've got head squash and we got value. So this is okay, so it's bend that we want. Okay, there it is. I mean, there you go. There's an example of what I was just talking about. I'm looking straight at this and I can't see it. Looking literally straight at it. Okay? Crazy, crazy, crazy how that works. Okay, this key needs to be duplicated. Yep, and it needs to be moved to here. So this is definitely challenging stuff. Okay, so we did it. The lattices got to where it's supposed to be. What is a little annoying is that the color is wrong, and that's because, yet again, I made a mistake. What's the mistake? Clearly, when I drew the left arm in, I was on frame 0, and I didn't realize I had added an additional keyframe. So now what we have to do is go back to the grease pencil object, and our dope sheet needs to be on grease pencil, and you can see the problem right here. This keyframe needs to be deleted, and now and by the way, not just on the fills, but also on the lines as well. So, okay, so now that's fixed. It's not like any of this stuff is particularly unfixable, but boy, you got to pay attention. Okay, at this point, yes, now we have to correct the empty animation. Okay, the animation of the empty. Right. So now we want to go back to dope sheet mode. There's the empty, and it looks like we're okay up to here. Bop, bop, right there. So rotate that, go, and then I'm hitting the shift key so I can like really dial it in. Next key, rotate, G key, and then shift so I can again really dial it in. we need to add, and this reveals we need to add his neck. Now, again, no harm done, because if we add the neck, it'll just show up whenever his head is. Okay, why I just animated that, and then it appears to have. Maybe I need to actually. Okay, yeah, my bad. That was stupid. But again, it's a mistake. Something I didn't know. After I move it, I need to insert the keyframe again. Otherwise, it's not going to remember, and it's going to snap back to the original keyframe. Crazy, all the stuff you got to remember, huh? But I can't emphasize enough that it does become second nature after a while. Trust me, it does. Okay, so now we don't have the nice facial expression to entertain us, but I think I'm going to turn the pencil test off just so we can kind of see what we got going on here. Yeah, so we can turn this off too. Yeah, and clearly his neck should be baked into the body, not the head. So that when the head moves around, the neck gets revealed. Not bad. Not bad, not bad, not bad. Those of you guys who know me know that I'm, of course, very pragmatically thinking to myself, okay, is this turning out to be a win or a loss? And the answer is, I'm not sure yet, actually. Until my facility has developed to the point where I'm not making a mistake like literally every 30 seconds, which I am doing. I've made so many mistakes here today. You can't count them, you know. Just little steps that you take either in the wrong order or do the wrong thing, or you forgot this or forgot that. So if you haven't gone through this type of difficulty with your software tool of choice, then you're probably still flopping around. Some people flop for years. And I certainly can be accused of that as far as Blender goes, because I haven't actually used Blender for, this level of animation where I'm using like the lattices and everything. I haven't really gone to that length in a long time. And so I think this would be a good place to stop. It's been an hour and 13 minutes, and normally I could go for a couple hours and it wouldn't be a problem. This process of like mistake after mistake after mistake actually fries my brain quicker than normal work. It really does. But I do like what I'm seeing here. If I could change one thing in Blender, actually, you know what it would be? It would be, I would have the Blender developers implement sculpting, grease pencil sculpting, as a modifier. Okay, so it's kind of the same mindset as geometry nodes, where everything's procedural, and essentially the sculpting process on your model would be a modifier or a node, downstream in the pipeline from your actual grease pencil drawing. And the reason that would be cool is because then you could do your pencil test and do like I did here, where you animate, you just use sculpting and the edit tool with proportional editing to just pound your animation into place. It's really easy with the pencil test. But the problem is, the reason I'm having to do everything with the lattices and stuff is that the drawing data, the grease pencil strokes, that drawing data is baked into the animation keys. You're going, well, what are you talking about, Dave? So what that means is that every place where there's another every place where there's another animation key, because you deformed it just with sculpting or whatever, so you got a single drawing and you sculpt, 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 and you kind of bend it and you twist it and you animate the thing, right? You get a lot of mileage out of a single drawing. The problem is that all the strokes are baked into these animation keys, which means as far as Blender's concerned, this is a completely different drawing than this one, even though they look the same almost. To Blender, these are two completely separate drawings. It's kind of the same problem you have in Krita, where the drawing data is baked into the animation keyframes. So why does that matter? Well, the reason it matters is that if you're taking a pencil test and you block in a sculpted animation and you're really liking what you see, you cannot just go in and add the lines and the color to this frame and have the deformations propagate through. That's the whole, everything I'm doing today, that's the problem I'm trying to solve, actually. Okay? You're trying to solve the fact that you cannot have the sculpting propagate through to the grease pencil object, such that you could build up your character layers after you've blocked in your pencil test and then just apply the sculpting the way I'm applying the lattice. Okay, now I get that it would be very, very hard to, that would be a tricky thing to implement. I guess I won't even try to get into why, but programmatically I can totally see where that would be a huge challenge to implement sculpting as a modifier. I'm pretty sure the Blender guys could do it. And so when you look at his face, if you look at all that sculpting animation, can you imagine if that animation right there was actually a modifier? So it was a completely separate operation over top of the drawing. Okay? If that were the case, then you could go ahead and build out the animation and change his face and do whatever you want to do. And, you know, the deformation animation would just apply to whatever the current state of the grease pencil drawing is. Hope that makes sense. If it worked that way, it would be really, really cool. You know, Krita has the same problem. The transform masks in Krita, if the transform masks in Krita could actually animate the liquefy tool, it would be like game over amazing. With one little caveat, because it doesn't really handle twisting very well, like rotations. But, you know, and I'm not saying it's not hard. I'm sure it's really hard from a development standpoint. But this is really kind of what you see with a lot of animation software is they get within inches of the goal line and then drop the ball, typically. I mean, that's actually kind of normal. The thing I always said with Krita, for the last basically 3 years, what would have made Krita amazing and not required the implementation of the animated transform mask, but would solve a whole host of problems in Krita, would be solved with one simple thing, which is that when you use a tool, it remembers the last thing you did. The filters already do that. You can hit Control F and it'll apply a filter twice. If the tools like the transform tool just simply would remember, always by default, remember its last setting, whatever was the last thing you did, all kinds of things would instantly become possible. Because you're still rolling your own keyframes in that scenario, but it would, you know, it would be a big step forward. So anyway, Blender's certainly a lot closer to that. Now what I'm wondering as I'm looking at this is, why? Oh, I see. I missed this. Did I miss this additional animation at the end? Let's go to our lattice. Find out what's going on. Got to go to our dope sheet. Yep, I missed it. So here's the lattice. And it's the bend. Okay, let's just get this. We might as well get it while we're here. Boom. So we have to duplicate this key. Shift D to here. Okay, and then we got to go like that. So lattice. Where are you, lattice? Okay, why is it still... The lattice is lit up as if it were selected, but it's actually not. So, okay, So now let's do the bend. Let's do the bend. Boom. Insert a key. Object mode. Grab the empty. Careful, careful. We got to duplicate this. Now here's a good example of a case where I didn't forget. That what I just remembered to do right there, that right there you just saw in real time a big step forward. Because something that 15 times in a row I would have forgotten, this time I didn't. I'm starting to remember, right? So go key, G I should say, rotate, go, and you got to insert the key, and once again, I remembered. So now, ta-da, okay. And I would say, yeah, I guess we actually want a second key in here. Let's move that to there. Well, I guess just spreading it out did the trick. Yep, there we go. Nice. Okay, good place to stop, I would say. All right, I'm going to look at the chat and see if anybody's got anything interesting up here. Based on the detail of the mesh, that could be a processing issue, but I'm sure it's doable. 1143. Okay, so you're talking about implementing sculpting as a procedural modifier. Performance could be an issue. Well, I would say arguably no, and here's why. The rationale would be this: if the steps, if you take the grease pencil and you do a sculpt, okay, and then you hit Control Z and you undo it, okay, what does that tell you? The previous state and the current state of the grease pencil mesh, for lack of a better term, or the grease pencil strokes, is stored in the buffers. They've already got it in the buffers. Okay, we know by hitting Control Shift E after sculpting grease pencil strokes that it has no trouble interpolating between two states and very instantly generating all the keyframes in between. Okay, so So it seems to me the most difficult thing about implementing grease pencil sculpting as a modifier or as a node, if they move towards, geometry nodes for the grease pencil, the most difficult thing would be if at a higher level you were to translate the entire grease pencil object, or worse, if you were in edit mode and you say hit the A key to select all and you moved all the strokes around, then when you apply the sculpt later on, it would be like a world space modifier. It would be sculpting a different part of the drawing than it was sculpting before you moved the vertices around. Now, that's an occupational hazard of working with this type of data that's inescapable anyway. So, the lattice, using a lattice gets it close to right, actually. The lattice gets it close to right. It's still not as powerful. Everything I'm doing here today is not at all as powerful and flexible as if you had drawn his body and drawn his head individually in Krita, brought them into Blender, just mapping the images to planes, and then doing your deformation animation directly on the mesh with shape keys would definitely be more powerful. And the reason it would be more powerful is one simple thing, is when you map an image to a mesh in Blender, you can selectively go into the mesh and decide how small you want the resolution of the vertices to be. So you could give yourself a lot more deformation resolution, let's say around his eyes, than you do, maybe out here where it doesn't matter as much. That level of control you can't get with a lattice. That's by far the hugest difference. If you wanted that type of maximum control, of course, what you could do is draw with the grease pencil, render it out, and then bring it in as images with planes. But if you do that, you're basically saying all the capability in Blender 2.8 really doesn't matter that much. And that is, in fact, true. Everything you can do with the grease pencil, the kind of stuff I'm doing here today, you've been able to do with images mapped to planes in Blender for many years. Many years. And if you integrated the grease pencil into that, you'd say, well, let's just create the basic grease pencil poses, render them out, and then map them to planes. But your ability to control what you're doing is vastly, I wouldn't say vastly, but it's quite a bit improved when you're dealing with a mesh. And the reason is what I just said. It's a big well, there's two reasons, actually. One is that it would be like having a lattice where you could have a lot higher resolution in the lattice around his face, for emulating facial muscles and things like that. If you could have a lattice that would do that, that would help. And then the other thing is, if you're dealing with a mesh, it's really, really easy to set up an IK bone structure that pretty much gets it right out of the box in terms of how it deforms the mesh. The general parenting usually guesses really, really well. It's not perfect, and if you have to deal with tight joints like elbows and things like that, obviously you got to go in and do some hand tooling of it. But so this whole shot, if you took this whole shot and just took the single drawing of his arms or his body and the single drawing of his head, okay, just the skull with the hair and the headband, no face, no eyes, okay. If I was going to do this 2 years ago, this is how I would have done it. Probably, if I was going to use Blender. I would draw his head, I would draw his body, I would bring him into Blender 2.79, I would do everything I'm doing now with the mesh. And then I would use the grease pencil to just draw the eyes and mouth over top of the meshes. And that is actually a really good workflow. It's actually a super good workflow. Very stable. Very flexible, and a little less, let's call it forgetfulness prone. You guys can see that what I've done over the last 4 sessions, there are so many steps that you have to remember that it's almost ridiculous. But as I say, it does become second nature. For example, just this. Just switching from between, it's like you grab something and nothing changes on the dope sheet, and then you remember, oh yeah, I forgot, I got to switch to the regular dope sheet, not the grease pencil dope sheet, right? There's a lot to learn, but this has always been true with Blender. So I think with that, I'll wrap it up. And again, I'll take a quick scan here through the... why don't you go pose to pose instead of wasting time in software tools and deformation, and just go pose to pose, and in between it will take longer. It's better, I guess. Well, because you're wrong, Dead Pianist. You're patently wrong. And I know I sound a little almost snarky saying that, but what I'm telling you is you are so spectacularly wrong. Because, and I've proven it a million times by taking frame-by-frame animation, bringing it into Tahoma, and then using the plastic tool to add secondary animation. What we're doing today is adding secondary animation. Okay? So the answer to your question is that yes, if you are a neophyte and you absolutely staunchly refuse to ever do the hard work I'm doing today, you will not. You refuse. You're never going to learn your tools. You're never going to get to the point where you're an expert. Okay? If that's who you are, then you're completely correct. Just doing frame-by-frame animation would be much faster. What would that look like in this case? It would just mean taking the pencil test. I would just turn this off right here. It would just mean doing just do ink and paint on the pencil test. There you go. The pencil test animation you're seeing right now is not being deformed by the lattice. So this is just what I originally drew. What I'm saying is, if you go through the hard work of learning your tools so that you know how to go ahead and connect up a lattice, set up your shape keys, yada, 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 do this, do that, and you do the right things in the right order, it turns out that the way I'm doing it here is actually not only faster, but it's a lot more flexible and powerful in terms of being able to dial it in and improve it in a completely procedural workflow. So yeah, if all you want to do is, so it's the difference between spending 12 hours learning what I would have to learn in order to do this seamlessly, versus spending 12 hours on every single shot you ever do. That's the difference we're talking about. Do you want to spend the 12 hours every time forever? Or do you want to spend the 12 hours one time learning the tools so that you can then save time in the long run? Why do you think every single show that's coming on Netflix is done this way? Right? Do you really think the Dragon Prince is being done by drawing every frame individually? No. The real world embraces a rigging-based approach because in the long run, if you master the tools, there's no debate. There's not even any debate at all. Now, you can argue about what you like better in terms of what it looks like. If you really love frame-by-frame animation, in a way that you simply can't reproduce the look the way I'm doing it here. Why? Well, because on every single frame, the lines change a little bit, right? Every single frame you draw is slightly different, and so that variance creates a certain aesthetic. And it is a beautiful aesthetic. It's wonderful, okay? But it's not time efficient. You can't make the case that having to ink and paint this character one time is not faster than having to ink and paint this character 32 times. Okay? There's no question. Inking and painting this character 32 times takes a lot longer. So that's I wanted to give you a full answer to your question because it's a really fair question you're asking. It's a good question. Because here I am spending 4 sessions just on this one shot. Ostensibly because I'm pretty sure that what I will learn in the process of going through this will allow me to do the same thing quicker and quicker and quicker over time. So, right? And by the way, if you take it even a step further, what you'd say is, well, now we have a grease pencil model of Mel's head right here that could in fact be brought into any other shot. Later in the show, I could reuse this head. And now the next time, I don't have to... Well, okay, dead pianist. Really, dude? Okay. Yes. Dead pianist. Let's just all acknowledge that dead pianist is correct. Yes, he is correct. You cannot take a 2D flat drawing and create a 360-degree turn. You can't do it. And you can't do it with sculpting tools either, not convincingly. You can do a little bit of a turn, but dead pianist is correct. Nope. If you wanted to have a 360-degree turn, what you would do is you would probably create about 6 drawings. You would have a 3/4 view, a little bit of a turn, a little bit of a turn, a little bit... Oh, I'm wrong. Sorry, I was wrong. I made a mistake. It would require 4 drawings. Now, that's if you're not showing the back of his head. If you're wanting to show the back of his head, that's a little different. But you could have a profile, kind of a tight 3/4, a medium 3/4, and then maybe one more keyframe and then a front-on shot, let's say. So now you got 5 drawings, and then you could just flip it. So if you flip it, that gets you from looking to the right to looking to the left. So you could do 5 drawings would do the trick, not for a 360-degree turn, but it would for a 180-degree turn. Right? So yeah, I mean, dead pianist is correct. If you want to draw a 360-degree turn, you do have to, well, you got to do some drawings. But is it not true that we actually have the 180-degree turn right here? Boop, there it is. Okay, so now if you're going to complain about the snap, right? If you want to complain about the feeling of the animation because you don't really like that sort of squish and snap type approach that I like, well, then that's a fair argument too. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But we have a 180-degree turn here, just not 360. So yeah, you're right. You're right. If you had to do a 360, you definitely need a few more drawings. I'll give you that. No question about it. So, coffee does turn you into a zombie if you have to. What about a full 360 turn around in 2D? Oh, dead pianist, that's such a silly question. I mean, and the answer is pitifully obvious. You've got to do some more drawings. Duh. Yeah, of course. Duh. All right, that's it for me, friends. And don't take that as too much snark. But I think it's a... what we have here is we have an ongoing tug of war between the hard work of doing lots of drawings and lots of ink and paint and really being good at creating an animated feeling of motion and whatnot in the drawings themselves, which I think I achieved here. I think I achieved it in the pencil test. So we have the tug of war between this, which is completely hand-drawn, versus the rigged approach, which is arguably going to save you time. But in this case, because of the learning curve and all the mistakes, it's not saving me time at all. But I knew it wasn't going to. The whole point here was to learn how to use the tools in Blender. And you know, think about it. In the long run, can you do, like, right there, that squash and stretch with his face, which is, it's not being done with the lattice here, obviously, but I did do it with the part that I painted. Can you really get that level of control with Tahoma or Krita? Well, yeah, if you draw every frame. If you do all the drawings, you can. Right? You could, because you could do it that way. I mean, for sure. You could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there's 4 drawings. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Probably you could have a substitute there because you're just changing the position of his eyes. So right now you're up to 9 drawings. So just to get to frame 19, you're talking about the difference between 9 drawings or 1. That's literally what you're talking about. Do you want to do 9 drawings, 9 ink and paints, or do you want to do 1? I'd rather do 1. Some people would rather do 9. Right? So now to get to here, there's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, would you rather do 17? So it wasn't 32, it was 17. 17 or 18. Would you rather do 18 drawings or would you rather do 1 drawing? That's the choice. And it's literally the choice. And, you know, obviously Hollywood has figured out that it's better to do 1 drawing instead of 19. Now, in Japan, they're still doing a lot of drawings, you know, in anime. And I love anime. I love the look of it and yada, yada, yada. So, not a one-size-fits-all type of situation. All right, so last look here at the brown sugar. Brown sugar, wait, in your coffee? Oh, boy, I don't do that. Yeah, I don't do sugar. When I have I just have 16 ounces in the morning of Cafe Bustelo, and I add half and half. That's it. 1 treat a day. Okay, guys, I'm done. Yeah, it's been over an hour and a half. I feel like I'm in a good place on this particular shot, and I probably, you know, made my point. So anyway, it's all good. All different ways of doing the same stuff. So with that, I will sign off and tell you guys that there will, I guarantee, there will be more later. Unless I drop dead or something. But I don't think that's likely. So